The Clockmaker's Secret. On a chilly autumn afternoon, the cobblestone streets of Dunwich were bustling with life. Street vendors called out their wares, children ran laughing between carts, and the scent of roasted chestnuts wafted through the air. Emma Hayes, a curious and adventurous young woman, had a knack for stumbling upon the extraordinary in the most ordinary of places. Today, her curiosity led her to a quaint antique shop tucked away in an alley she had never noticed before. The sign above the shop read, "Timeless Treasures," its letters faded but elegant. The moment Emma stepped inside, the aroma of aged wood and leather greeted her. Shelves lined with peculiar artifacts and dusty trinkets filled the dimly lit space. An elderly man with round spectacles sat behind the counter, meticulously repairing a pocket watch. "Welcome," he said without looking up. His voice was soft but carried a weight of wisdom. "Feel free to explore. Every item here has a story." Emma's eyes scanned the room until they landed on an ornate clock sitting on a pedestal in the corner. Its golden frame was intricately carved with symbols she couldn't decipher, and the hands of the clock ticked in reverse. "That one is special," the old man said, suddenly appearing beside her. "The Clock of Horizons. It doesn't just tell time, it reveals it." "What do you mean?" Emma asked, intrigued. "This clock can show you what will happen exactly 1 hour into the future. But be warned," he said, his tone turning grave. "Tampering with time always comes at a cost." Emma hesitated. The idea seemed absurd, yet the allure of such a possibility was irresistible. "How much?" "For you, £20, the man replied, his eyes twinkling as if he knew she couldn't resist. Without another word, Emma handed over the money. The old man wrapped the clock carefully and handed it to her. "Use it wisely, my dear," he said, his voice echoing in her mind as she left the shop. At home, Emma placed the clock on her kitchen table. She stared at it for a moment, wondering if she had been duped. Curiosity got the better of her, and she turned the small dial on the side. The clock's hands whirred and stopped. A faint mist filled the room, and suddenly she saw herself sitting at the same table drinking tea when the kettle on the stove began to whistle. A moment later, the vision faded. Emma shook her head, confused. But as she reached for her cup, the kettle on her stove began to whistle, just as she had seen. Her heart raced. Could it really work? She spent the next few days testing the clock. It was uncanny how accurately it predicted the immediate future. She used it for small things at first, avoiding a spilled coffee, catching a bus just in time, or remembering an umbrella before a sudden downpour. Each success made her more confident and more curious. One evening, Emma decided to take the clock to her favorite cafe. As she sat by the window, sipping her coffee, she turned the dial again. The mist appeared, and this time she saw something that made her blood run cold. A man in a black coat and hat entered the cafe, pulling a gun from his pocket. Panic spread across the faces of the patrons as he demanded money. The vision ended, leaving Emma trembling. She glanced at the clock on the wall. The man would arrive in 20 minutes. She had to act fast. She flagged down a waiter and whispered about her vision, careful not to sound insane. He hesitated but eventually agreed to call the police. Emma then moved to the back of the cafe, urging others to stay calm without revealing too much. True to the clock's prediction, the man entered exactly 20 minutes later, but this time the police were ready. They subdued him before he could harm anyone. Emma's heart pounded as relief washed over her. Word of Emma's lucky intuition spread, and soon she found herself using the clock to help others. She prevented accidents, reunited lost items with their owners, and even uncovered a small theft at her workplace. But with each use, she noticed something strange. The clock's ticking grew louder, almost impatient, and the mist lingered longer after each vision. She began documenting her experiences in a journal, detailing the times and outcomes of her interventions. At first, it was thrilling. She felt like she had a purpose, a way to make a tangible difference. But the more she used the clock, the more she felt the weight of its power. It was as if the clock was demanding more from her, pushing her to test the limits of its abilities. One night, Emma dreamt of the old clockmaker, He stood in a dark void, his eyes sorrowful. "The clock demands balance," he said. "Every act of interference creates ripples. You must be prepared for the consequences." She woke up in a cold sweat. What did he mean by balance? The answer came sooner than she expected. Emma's best friend, Sarah, was visiting her apartment when the clock chimed loudly, even though she hadn't touched it. The mist filled the room, showing Sarah in a car crash. Emma screamed, breaking the vision. Desperate to prevent the tragedy, Emma convinced Sarah to stay the night instead of driving home. The next morning, they learned of a massive pileup on the highway Sarah would have taken. Relief turned to dread when Emma realized the mist from the clock now seeped from its edges constantly, as if it were alive. She returned to the antique shop, clutching the clock. The old man was waiting for her, his expression grim. "I warned you," he said. "The clock's power is not a gift. It's a burden. The more you change the future, the more the clock takes from you." "What does it want?" Emma asked, tears in her eyes. "Time," he replied. "Your time." The clockmaker offered Emma a choice. Keep the clock and continue to alter the future at the cost of her own life force, or return it and let time take its natural course. With a heavy heart, Emma handed the clock back. The moment she did, the weight lifted from her chest. The mist disappeared, and the ticking stopped. The old man placed the clock back on its pedestal, giving her a small, knowing smile. "Remember," he said, "your greatest power lies in living the present." As Emma stepped out into the crisp evening air, she felt lighter. Life, she realized, was meant to be lived moment by moment. Uncertain, unpredictable, and beautifully real. Over the following days, Emma tried to adjust to a life without the clock. At first, it felt strange to face uncertainty without a guarantee of what lay ahead, but she soon discovered a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in months. Each choice, each decision, carried a renewed weight of importance, and it was exhilarating. One day, as she walked through the bustling streets of Dunwich, she noticed small changes in herself. She was more attentive, noticing details she would have overlooked before. The glint of sunlight on a puddle, the laughter of children, the way leaves danced in the wind. Without the clock, she was truly present for the first time in a long while.
Her relationships began to improve as well. Sarah, grateful for Emma's intervention, became closer to her than ever. They shared long conversations about life, dreams, and the strange adventure with the clock. Sarah's perspective helped Emma see that her gift, while extraordinary, had also been isolating. Now, she was free to connect with others without the burden of knowing what lay ahead. Months later, Emma passed by the alley where the antique shop had been. To her surprise, the shop was gone. In its place was a blank wall, as if the store had never existed. She smiled, a sense of closure washing over her. The clockmaker and his mysterious wares had served their purpose, and now it was time to move on. Emma's life was far from perfect, but it was hers to shape. And in the unpredictability of each moment, she found a beauty she had almost forgotten. The future was a mystery, and that was exactly how she wanted it to be.